It's a privilege to have such a distinguished set of speakers with us today. Let me welcome Dr. Ramani at the Institute. It has been an institute in many ways, and it's always a pleasure to have him with us. Dr. Ramani has a PhD from IIT Bombay. He has worked as a researcher at the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research in Mumbai and at the Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. From 1985, he served as the founding director of the National Center for Software Technology, where he played a key role in creating India's academic network, EARNet. And some of us would know the early days of EARNet when it got started. EARNet brought the internet to India, and for his contributions to bringing internet to such a vast country like India, Dr. Ramani was inducted by the Internet Society into the Hall of Fame in 2014. Dr. Ramani has served as the first director of Hewlett Packard Labs India from 2001 and as a professor at IIIT Bangalore from 2007 to 2011. He has served as a member of the expert panel of advisors of the United Nations Task Force on ICT for Development. He is a fellow of the Indian National Academy of Engineering and a fellow of the Computer Society of India. It's again a privilege to have Dr. Ramani with us today, and he is going to speak on a very interesting topic on what is missing in the internet. Dr. Ramani. Thank you. Let's welcome Dr. Ramani.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here, to be talking on this occasion about the internet. I'll share some thoughts. There is very often a tendency to say that, worry about numbers. Like, for instance, we are ranked number 107 in something or the other, and among the countries of the world, or that less than 1,000th of the websites in the world are in an Indian language. Let's say take a particular Indian language like Hindi or Gujarati or Tamil. None of them has more than 1 in 1,000 of the websites. So that is a matter of a concern. And now more recently, TROI has come out with a consultation paper in which it says we do not have even 1/1000th of the Wi-Fi hotspots in the world. Now these numbers, I think, are indicative there is some problem. Like, for instance, I do think there is some problem about the use of the internet and what it has to offer in Indian languages. There is a very basic problem, and I think the problem is not just with the technology. It is with the way we have been evolving our languages. It has been the way we have been integrating science, technology, economics, and modern life with Indian languages. As a result, we have a serious problem, and it's such a complex problem. I think language and the internet is worth a discussion for a day in itself. So I won't worry too much about that. At the moment, I worry about what I will talk about today is largely about issues like what do we want the internet to deliver? In general, the whole of ICT, information and communication technologies, and in particular, the internet. What do we want it to deliver? Increasing the number of Wi-Fi hotspots alone is not going to solve the problem. Increasing mobile data is not going to solve the problem. If a lot of mobile data usage were to increase, and if everybody is going to use a smartphone to watch a movie every week, I don't think it's going to do very much good to us. And so ultimately it is what we want out of all this. What we want is some economic benefit by the use of these technologies. We want better service delivery, whether it's government services in administration, education, health, legal services, whatever, banking. And we also want to avoid unnecessary and avoidable divides, the famous digital divide. We have stopped using the word, but there are divides of various kinds all over the place. So we would like to avoid them. And therefore we talk about research into these issues, and I think that is particularly relevant in an to an audience like this. Research is what many of us can do to contribute in some way to solving some of these problems. And educational institutes are interested in this research, and research is the basis for policy. Without research, you cannot make significant policy. Every whim and fancy of somebody becomes policy. That is not the real way to go. So we will talk about policy and research and what is the reality. And I would tend to be a bit more negative than positive. I think there are a lot of things to be positive about. I'm not going to kill myself trying to balance between the 2 points of view. I'm more concerned with the negative because our effort should be focused on the where we are weak. We ought to know what our problems are. We ought to be critical of ourselves. So from this point of view, please pardon me if I sound a bit more negative all the way. Now, when you come to policy, you can ask the question, whose policy is it? There are companies, regulatory authorities, government departments, and educational institutions. And in these, many companies are worried about many of these things. We ought to be fair to them. They have worried about the digital divide, they have worried about Indian languages, and they have worried about the bottom of the pyramid, as they call it, as Prahlad so powerfully made us all realize. And he also gave us a hope that somehow working with the bottom of the pyramid will solve many of these problems. But it doesn't always work. And under the pressures of meeting quarter-to-quarter targets, the managers very often do not have the patience to worry about the bottom of the pyramid. Working with the bottom of the pyramid, that is the people in the lower rungs of the economy, it's a long-term game. It's not a one-day game. It's not a quarter-to-quarter game. And so the company policies go that far, but no farther. And very quickly, companies also recognize that the bulk of their profits come from the top 15% of the people. The top 15% who have everything, who have the English language, who have the jobs in the sunrise parts of the economy, and who have access to technology, who live in urban areas, they have everything. And these people are those who provide the bulk of the profits to the high technology companies. As a result, the bottom of the pyramid dream has not yet worked out, has not, how fast it will work out is a question to look at. Now, next you can look at regulatory authorities. People like TRAI have been a good job. And, Indians in general are said to be good in accounts. We have a good Controller and Auditor General. We are well known all over the world for being good accountants, and the international organizations love Indian organizations because at least they keep good accounts. And we have all that benefits. But regulatory authorities do a good job, I should say, by and large. But what they can achieve is very often limited. They are under tremendous pressure from lobbies. All kinds of pressures come on the regulatory authorities. Then there are the departments of government which have chosen to play a promotional role rather than a regulatory role. A lot depends upon them. And it also falls upon ministries like the Education Ministry or the Health Ministry. What are they doing to use technology and to benefit from technology and improve their own service delivery? And then finally, I come, this is not the least of the lot. In fact, it's a very important thing. The educational institutions. As I said, that is because we are dealing with citizens of the future, and they are the ones who are going to play a very big role in bringing more and more technology into this country, and they are going to do the research. From this point of view, the educational institutes play a very important role. Let me mention a problem relating to economic loss. Recently, I did a trip to Tanjavur district, and we went out and came back by car and paid something like 620 rupees. It was not the 620 that mattered, toll at the toll gates, but it was the loss of something like 2 hours or so. Excruciating waits at the toll gates, unnecessary problems, waits and this and that, and small notes being changing hands and so on and so on. So I started reading about that. Why are the toll gates not collecting toll in a sensible way using some technology? And there is a lot of technology around in use in India, but is not being used for toll gates. Like for instance, here in the morning when I came, my car was something like the 20th in the line to pay toll, and it was a taxi, and the taxi driver pays cash, and the taxi driver must be coming often to Electronic City, but he does not have any of these wireless methods of paying toll. And there is a big problem right there. They are doing a good job of managing it. They have put some 20 people on the job, and those guys stand in front of the toll gate and collect cash and issue slips and so on and so on. A lot is being done by them as good managers, but on the other hand, technology is not being used in an intelligent way. It was introduced in a fairly stupid way, I should say. There was a mechanism whereby you could pay 1,000 rupees in advance. As a matter of fact, I have one of those wireless devices in my car where I have paid 1,000 rupees. And when my car comes into Electronic City, it zooms in. But everybody does not want to pay 1,000 rupees in advance and keep it lying around. And so the flexible way of introducing it so that any one of us can pay using our bank account for almost anything, that dream of small time payments has not been realized. And I asked Nandan Nilekini in a meeting, I said, Nandan, why is this happening? Why are we in such a problem? Obviously, Nandan has thought about this and he has done something about that. He said, yes, we are doing it. There was a problem with the Wi-Fi and we are going to redo it, or something like that. And yes?
We heard that Nandan has initiated 2 projects. One is Unified Payment Interface.
Yes.
And electronic toll collection also.
I'm going to talk about them. Yes, I'm going to talk. Actually, these projects were started in 2012, and the Highways Management, Indian Highways Management Company was given the job of automating toll collection, and they were given the target year of 2014. 2014 has come and gone, but the toll gates remain what they are. And what is the problem? It turned out that Shyam Ponnappa wrote about this in the Economic Times, and he had a very dramatic article, and I picked up a photograph to go with that. He says, trucks moving between Bombay and Delhi alone cause a loss of 2% of the GNP to the Indian economy. I do not know. IIM Calcutta seems to have been involved in a study, and Shyam Ponnappa quotes that study, and therefore there is some academic thinking, some checking up of facts. But 80,000 crore loss due to delay of the trucks running between 2 major cities alone is a bit difficult to visualize. So we have to be a bit careful about these numbers. But on the other hand, we all know that these things happen. And Shyam Ponnappa quotes the IIM study saying that the average truck speed between Bombay and Delhi is 22 kilometers per hour. And we all know within the city of Bangalore, the car movements are at 9 kilometers per hour. They used to be 25 kilometers per hour in 2004. Now we have tripled the number of cars, and the speeds have gone down to 1/3, and we are back where we were in 2004. We need not have bought all these cars. And what is technology doing about traffic? What is technology doing about small payments? This is the kind of question we have to ask. And you may wonder, what has this got to do with policy? And I think one important dimension of policy is this. Policy is partly to do with promotional activities by the promotional departments of the Government of India, by the Indian research labs. They all have a responsibility, and we cannot import technology blindly. Whatever they make in China, we import some of that and then use it and say it doesn't solve my problem. How will it solve my problem? It's like taking my neighbor's tablets and swallowing them and saying my headache doesn't go. And we have to have our own medicine, and there is a design gap. And I think one important part of our research responsibility is to look at these design gaps where our specific problems are not attended to and products are not designed to solve them, but we are using products which were designed to solve somebody else's problem, some other problem. And okay, so I mentioned about this traffic problem. Then I went around and said, what has the government done? It is not that nothing has been done, a lot has been done. If you see, in 2010, the country launched the National Payments Corporation of India. We have had good ideas, we launch good projects. We don't always deliver. And if you look at this, the Immediate Payment Service, IMPS, this is actually from an ICICI app. And any of you can use the ICICI app, and you see the detail that you have to provide to send money to somebody. It's fairly small. One is a mobile number, the other is the MMID, which is a unique number that the bank gives them. And the bank even gave me an MMID just on the web. I didn't have to go anywhere. I asked for an MMID, I got an MMID. So it's very easy in principle for me to pay. But who uses this? How many of you use this for small payments? And it's not us. We belong to that 15%. The focus of our thinking should be not that 15%, but at least the next 15%. If not the 85%, we have to worry about the adjacent 15%. If we do not worry about them, we are not going to have anything new. We are not going to have any growth. And so there is an immediate payment service using my bank account, I can pay money to almost anybody fairly quickly and easily. But this is not integrated into our economy. This is not very heavily used. And surely it is not used by the next 15%. The top 15% might use it, but hardly anybody else uses it. And even the top 15, I have some doubts about this. For instance, let's ask the question, do the auto rickshaw drivers use it? It will make a difference to them. They use cell phones heavily, they talk. And but on the other hand, they all carry smartphones now. For some reason, their sons and daughters say, we want a camera in the cell phone. And we want to see video. We want this. And they even go to YouTube and see some video out of the YouTube. But that doesn't mean that they really use a smartphone. I used to say 10 years ago, I never seen an Indian driver with a map in hand. And that is still true. And despite the fact that the driver has a cell phone, a smartphone in his hand, he doesn't use the map because the map is all in English. And he is not comfortable with English. And a map is difficult to use for the untrained person, even if he is comfortable with the language. But when he is not comfortable with the language, he doesn't use it. And he uses it to say start when if it's a Ola cab or an Ola auto or something like that, Uber, he does a start and a stop, and he knows how much money has been paid. He is happy with that. That is the extent of his use. GPS is hardly ever used, and small time payments, fortunately, we are able to do through Paytime for Uber and for Ola Money for Ola and so on. So we do use small time payments now in some sense reasonably well. Let's look at the Paytime app. The Paytime app goes further, a little bit better than the banking app. It doesn't ask me for an MMID. I have to only give two numbers. What is the merchant's mobile number, which can be written there? It's very often a barcode, I can scan it. Or the other thing is the amount of money. So I can put this in, and if I want to make notes for myself, I can say what it is for. If I don't need it, I don't need it. So the Paytime app is good. But who uses Paytime app to pay an auto? Who uses Paytime app to pay a shop? Almost nobody does. Yes, you do?
The focus, I understand. No, you're not talking about that. So,
Yes.
so when you mentioned this Paytime app or even mobile, I think what you focused was on user experience kind of thing, where language is the major issue. But I see it as another issue of the expense he has to incur to use internet, which is not that small if we see. That is one thing. Second one is, do you see any reason of kind of black transactions getting into this, where if I transfer money into somebody's account here, so most of these people are non-taxpayers who run these small businesses and all. So does it come into the picture or anything? I mean, I'm just hypothesizing, I don't know.
I think you have raising very important points. We have a gentleman here who mentioned about the toll gates. Which organization do you belong to?
Sir, I am from National Payments Corporation of India.
Okay.
Yeah, so
I'm glad you are.
But I noticed that the language is, I can give you one example. Today morning,
Yes.
the cab is taking from me hotel to here. When he coming, there was a two language. That person do not able to read Kannada or English. Then he was come to a diversion point. He was slowing down and asking, sir, is it way to Electronic City? Then I said, yes, you go. So I think it is, the point is, this language also become one of the barrier to adoption in the mass.
Right. And the question you raised is also very valid. I got that as an answer when I went around asking a lot of people, why are we not speeding up the payments at the toll gates? And somebody told me, you might see National Highways Authority of India or whatever, but most of these roads have been built using public-private partnership. And most of them, a lot of the money collected probably goes in the black. And now that is a very serious allegation. We can't seriously talk about that at an academic seminar, but the suspicion is there that technology is very often not applied because it brings in transparency, and therefore technology is slowed down. If I wanted a percentage of my collection to generate black money for myself and I pay bribe out of that, I would not want technology to come and mess it up, and I will find 100 excuses. Thank you. So that is about the small time payments problem, but it has brought us a number of other things, like for instance, what is the incentive? As a matter of policy, let's ask the question. Is there something we can do to incentivize the auto rickshaw driver or the small shopkeeper to accept small payment electronically? Why should we do that? Because, the paisas all disappeared, 25 paisa, 50 paisa, 1 rupee more or less disappeared. Now 5 rupees are disappearing. Small payments are becoming a problem everywhere. People suffer a little bit, and banks do not deal with small money like that anymore. And if you go to the ATM, it'll give you 500 rupee notes. Small payments have to be automated. But what incentive can we give? One of them might be perhaps the government of India owns bulk of our oil companies which do the distribution. Maybe they can give, one plane ticket off per company per day for people who buy petrol only using electronic payment. And it will cost you 5 crores of rupees or something like that per year. But it catches the people's imagination. The Chinese have used this to improve their tax collection. And so maybe an incentive. Maybe we can get tougher. If you were China, we could say you can buy petrol only if you pay electronically. And that will cut a lot of black money out. Yes?
The question that I had is, when we're discussing small transactions, shouldn't the question of how to incentivize the users to use small transactions, the app, be part of the design process of the app?
It should be, yes.
Would you say that there is...
But the incentives are huge. Yesterday I spent 3 hours at the RTO's office where I paid 200 rupees at one counter, 50 rupees at another counter, and at both counters I stood in a queue of about 50 people. Why can't they collect both the money in one shot? I don't know. 50 rupees for the smart card is collected separately, 200 rupees is collected separately. So when we talk about research, design, policy, all this, the user is central. But the user already has a tremendous incentive to use technology to save himself time. Let me very quickly mention a couple of things and wind up. GPS is hardly ever used by the people. It is not used because if you look at the GPS coordinates of my home, it is something like 78.35492 and 12.567. So, and I do not want a GPS number like that, because if I ever invited you home, I can't tell you that number over the telephone. You can't remember it. You can't write it down. You don't enter it into your machine. We all use a search engine, go to your map and then find the place. But very often you need to have a landmark. And we need to have something like this, a simple form of a GPS, which is good enough within a city. A GPS coordinates reduced in a usable form, which is visually displayed at bus stops and at places like interesting tourist places like this, Tipu's palace. So there are design possibilities that can be done. Then let me skip and come to the questions. What are the major questions? With that I'll conclude. There is a huge big resource in the government of India's hands. They created the Universal Service Obligations Fund and collected 5% of the revenue from the telecom companies and put them in. And in the first 10 years between 2003 and 2013, they collected 50,000 crores of rupees. And out of that, they reported to the nation, they have allocated 15,000 crores of rupees. 1/3 of the money. Why allocated? They did not actually spend it. They have just allocated it on the books. Some of it might have been spent. Now, this causes a lot of worry. Would it have been better to have left that money in the hands of the telecom sector? They would have done a lot of good, extending the telecom in India. The primary purpose of this telecom fund, the Universal Services Obligation Fund, was this: to essentially reduce the divide between urban areas and rural areas, to make sure ICT is of benefit to a much wider section of the people. So much of what we have been worrying about should have been solved by the Universal Service Obligations Fund. I saw the list of partners of the USOF. I have not found many academic institutions. I have not found any research being funded by USOF. I perhaps should do more study in that carefully. But 35,000 crores of rupees lying unused is a huge amount of money. So there should be no problem in finding money for doing a whole lot of research into policy issues and asking questions like, what is the real benefits that ICT can give to the rural people? It's not just increasing the number of hotspots, but what real benefits can we deliver? What have we delivered? We have delivered a lot, like for instance with banking, computerization. So what can we do? What should be done? Focusing on the end results. And we ought to look at what research has come out of USOF and what publications have come out of it. I think academics should focus on these issues. I wanted to particularly mention this here in this meeting. So with that, I will conclude. Thank you for your attention.
We have time for maybe 2 or 3 questions.
Thank you, Dr. Ramani. You spoke about the example that you gave was the using of the financial app, right? The ICICI Bank app. Or when you spoke about the use of maps and navigation. The question I want to ask, and this comes out of having done a study over 3 months looking at Ola auto drivers and their experiences with the app and in terms of their navigation and in terms of how they interact with the financial transactions using the app. What came through to us was that while one of the reasons is that they look at technology as something that they do not understand, and that's where the language of it sometimes being in English acts as an impediment. The other that came to us was that they do not have a larger institutional access to something like banks or other financial institutions, which is also the reason that they are not users of something like the small payments or something outside of the app. So they say that we ask them, what do you prefer? Do you prefer a cash or do you prefer the online payment system? And they all almost universally agree that they prefer the cash system because they said accessing, even though through the Ola apps it was easier for them to access it. They said it's because they do not have the required institutional access outside of the platform towards these formal banking systems, due to which they prefer having a day-to-day cash transaction. Likewise, when it came to navigation, they said while the language is an issue, the ability to read maps, or for that matter, just that it can be even in Kannada, but they said they sometimes do not understand the language that they're interacting with in terms of reading it, which is why they are not able to use the technology very effectively. So that brings me to my question on whether the use of technology needs to be seen in the larger context of other institutional accesses and policies. And sometimes the answer to these might lie outside of the technological artifact and the technological framework.
You're perfectly right. Do you want to mention the institution that did the research?
I was working at IIIT. I'm coming back here as a doctoral candidate.
Okay. And is there a publication that came out of your research? Do you want to mention that to the audience?
We've used the study for 2 papers, for 2 conference publications. One was at the SASC publication on model economies at UC Berkeley, and the other was for a workshop which looked at Bangalore's transformation organized by NIAS.
Perhaps you could put it down on the board sometime during the day. People might be interested. And you are perfectly right that technology plays a small role in this. Human affairs are complex, and technology is just one small part of it. And language is a significant part. But you are mentioning your research in Ola suddenly triggers one thought. Ola Money is convenient and it works well. I have been using it. But on the other hand, imagine what it would mean to a company like Ola if anyone with a bank account could use his bank account and make the small payment instead of being a registered user of Ola already. Why should we require the guy to be a registered user? What can be done? And second, why is the bank not taking the initiative that they should be taking? We know telecom companies in mobile payments have been so conservative and so hesitant and so unimaginative that telecom companies have largely lost the game in mobile payments in India to various other startups and various other electronic wallets. And so we have to ask the question, why, if even telecom companies can be that deficient in imagination, you can imagine how deficient the banks are. And we have to worry about this, that why is there no risk taking, why there is no, spending 5 crores of rupees in a small project, why are they not doing it? Why can't a bank meet the requirements that you were visualizing of an institution outside the app, something that will supplement it? Why can't a bank do that? I don't know, we have to ask. Yep.
My name is Samiran Gupta and I'm with ICANN. I would like to just answer the young lady's question over there. Not that I'm speaking on behalf of Government of India, but I understand that there is a fund called Disha. And there was Disha, it's in 2 parts, Disha 1 and now Disha 2 is about to be implemented. And I think what we're hearing in this room today is this is a great example of your research or this institute's research to be presented to those who are running that fund, to create awareness. That fund is to create awareness of IT across the country amongst the folks who are new to computers and the internet. So, the trend of this conversation is that rather than possibly teach what is a monitor and how to go to Google or whatever, some kind of a practical training on how small businesses or small business folks can actually use IT for their benefit. So there is apparently a mechanism in place. I don't know enough about it, but I keep hearing about it because people talk about it. So possibly this is a place that you could look at.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta. We'll probably take one more question and then we'll move on to the next session. Very interesting. I hope Professor Ramani will be.
I actually have one comment. My name is Usha Reddy and I work in the ICT for development space. And I have worked in it for many years. And in a university also. And among the things that I have found is, and when you refer to the Universal Services Obligation Fund or for the need for research, the fact is that in many places we work within our comfort zones of either political science or economics or IT or whatever. There isn't enough of interdisciplinary research where a team of people from various disciplines come together to understand a particular problem. This, I think, would mean that you need rural sociologists, you need psychologists, you need political economy people, you need the IT. And there just isn't enough because I think we're too comfortable. That's what I just wanted to add.
But management schools, design schools, and the institutions like this are all basically multidisciplinary, right?
So our universities, and still we're working within our own cabinets.
I can imagine in an electrical engineering department or a computer science department being too comfortable with their own algorithms or whatever. But how can a management institute be non-disciplinary, non-multidisciplinary?
In practice, by structure it is, I agree with what you're saying. But in actual practice, when you put together proposals for research and we want to bring in teams, it's a very, very difficult problem to bring them together. I'm just saying from my experience.
I know.
Because I've done this work and I've published on it and I know that I've shared it all with them. So it's very, very difficult to get there.
The problem I see is very often, the design schools and the engineering schools do not work together. The designers do great work, the engineers do great work, but they won't work together.
Exactly.
That is the problem.